Good morning, this is Monty once again from DPL Surveillance Equipment. Now today is going to be a very gorgeous day. Unfortunately, the rain didn't continue, so it looks like we won't get the type of green grass and such growing on the hillsides as we need, particularly in California. So every fair day for us is going to be not so good for the plants and the animals and the birds and stuff, because I think we need a lot of rain here. Anyway, maybe the humans will enjoy the fair weather, since most people are fair weather beings, right? Heaven forbid it should get too hot or too cold or too wet or something. Even if we have to pay the price later on as a result of these extended periods where everything is just gorgeous for us. What else is going on in the world? This particular journalist, American journalist, was seen entering the building, but unfortunately never seen exiting the building. And supposedly the United States has intercepted messages and communications that seem to indicate that there was indeed a plot forming out of Saudi Arabia to have assassins and such either kidnap or just outright kill this particular journalist. So anyway, that's an ongoing situation. Other than that, the stock market doesn't seem to be showing that much strength right now. The tech shares and the technology companies have been holding up the stock market for a long, long time, but it looks like it may be running out of steam. We have to see what happens next week. But based upon interest rates going up and outstanding debt that people have, corporations, individuals, or households, and government, all that debt has to be serviced. And if interest rates keep going up, then undoubtedly that's going to have a major impact on the ability of the economy overall to sustain itself. So much for high GDP growth in a high interest rate environment. I don't think those two are going to go hand in hand at all for right now. So what else is going on? Look like Sears is pretty much history. The retail industry overall is basically looking very weak, considering that most of the major players, or at least the old school players, aren't going to be around very much longer. The only thing I see going forward is going to be a major emphasis being put on the extreme low end, like the dollar stores and the Walmarts and those types of stores, versus on the opposite end, you're going to have online, probably dictated, of course, by Amazon, and maybe Walmart in that area too. But it looks like it's a severe race to the bottom as usual. This is not a good sign for a strong, resilient, superpowered type of economy. You want to have people with enough discretionary income to have choices and to be able to support the middle range businesses, the Macy's and the maybe some Kohl's or something, some middle range companies anyway. That doesn't look like that's showing a great deal of sign of strength in the middle range. So anyway, what else is going on? Let's take a look at who I am. I am owner of DPL Surveillance Equipment. We run a full-service surveillance and security equipment company. We do have lifetime guarantees and warranties on all the products, 24/7, 365 tech sales and customer support. And we have the largest inventory of items that not only can you buy, but you can rent and lay away as well. And we have an extremely large and growing media center. I really have to emphasize, you guys, don't take for granted the articles and the podcasts and the blogs, because there's nothing like having an educated population. And most people don't seem to understand. The more you exercise your brain, the more new things you learn, the more comprehensive skills you adapt, the better capable you're going to be going forward when you grow older, particularly. So get those brain cells exercised, and make sure you understand that you need to understand and build and learn something new every day, hopefully. So anyway, I'm not a big proponent, as you can tell, of ignorant people. What else is happening? Oh yeah, in the shopping cart, we accept Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum in the shopping cart. So you crypto millionaires, make sure you understand you can use your crypto profits and wealth, as me and my wife and my family have taken advantage of. Considering the last 4 or 5 years since we've been in cryptos, we've done very well by making that transition and putting more emphasis in the crypto space as compared to the regular fiat space, which is dying pretty rapidly. When you see the IMF's Christine Lagarde warning everyone that the potential of blockchain and Bitcoin seems to be very, very appealing as compared to what's happening in the traditional economy. The global economy, for instance, is expected to slow down and maybe even, in my opinion, may even become a major issue in the very near future. Mainly because so much printed monopoly money floating around that's worthless, and everybody's buying it and holding it and storing it, and it's worthless, and people finally realize after the fact. Then you have a Venezuela, then you have an Argentina, then you have a Cyprus, then you have a Italy type of situation where it takes hundreds of billions of dollars, more fake money, to bail out. And then you have the bail-ins. So it just goes on and on. It's just a mess. But real people get hurt. Families migrate in mass amounts from one country to the other just to get food and water and shelter. While in the meantime, Americans, in between eating pizza and chicken wings, look at the news and try to express some sympathy for what's going on, even though we have a carbon footprint that's probably 4 or 5 times of what you see in other countries, particularly developing countries. Also, our website has been redesigned. We optimized it for mobile, and it's very easy to navigate and find products. The new products range in the tens or hundreds. We got a lot of new products, and we got a lot of used products for sale for people who don't have as much discretionary income as others. You want to save some money on the used products, go right ahead. They're sold as is, but they were formerly rented out products. Some of them are still very new looking, because after 1 week of rental, you don't put a lot of mileage on a product. Typically, people who give me a credit card as a deposit or collateral when they rent something, they keep that product in good shape because they want to get their deposit back. So that's the way that works. Besides, I check every product before it's sent out or before it comes back, just to make sure that the next customer gets a very good quality rental product. Anyway, those products are on the website. They're available under a used category. And what else? Remember the MasterCards and the Visas and American Expresses. These are the companies. That's the industry that's ruining the economy. The traditional banks, the credit card merchant processors. The reason why they're written up every day for anybody who's literate or even halfway literate, you can see that they've been caught, and they're guilty of everything imaginable. Money laundering, illicit funds transfers, LIBOR, interest rate rigging, manipulation of key benchmark indexes, gold and futures contracts, backdoor holes in their software, whereby insiders working for J.P. Morgan or Morgan Stanley or whoever, their traders get access to better deals and get the front run activity in the stock market or commodities, whatever trades, they get the opportunity to front run those trades as compared to the retail clients that they're supposed to be working for. So you can see a lot of that on my website, just in case you can't find it online. I have a lot of that information on my website, where $13 billion was defined for J.P. Morgan Chase, $260 billion in money laundering. That was the case for the Russians, doing money laundering out of a bank in Estonia, an Eastern European country. It just goes on and on. HSBC, UBS, everybody has their hands dirty. Central bankers, family members trying to get $2 or $3, $5 billion of the citizens' money for their own personal piggy banks and pleasure, buying the yachts and the hotels and the Rembrandts and the Picassos, giving lavish parties in Las Vegas. So the whole system is corrupt. Open your eyes. Don't be stupid. Make sure you understand we need to change things, radically reform things, and probably want to use the cryptocurrency technology, the transparency, redundancy, resiliency, peer-to-peer decentralized nature of the blockchain to accomplish that. Other than that, let's take a look at this article and see what we have to offer. By the way, my articles are about a lot of topics other than surveillance or counter-surveillance, other than terrorism, anti-terrorism technology. We do cover health and fitness, cybersecurity, cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, and health and fitness as well. And this will probably somehow go under health and fitness. I think it may be a stretch, but we'll figure out either that or miscellaneous. Let's see. So what is this article about? This article is about, it says, meet the scientists bringing extinct species back from the dead. Again, meet the scientists bringing extinct species back from the dead. New gene editing technology could revive everything from passenger pigeon to the woolly mammoth. But should scientists be playing God? The pigeons are outwardly remarkable. 13 birds, ages 2 weeks, 2 to 3 months occupy. The birds' ages 2 weeks to 2 to 3 months occupy a coop in an animal research facility west of Melbourne, Australia. They're descendants of the common rock pigeon, recognizable denizens of city squares and park benches, with one small but crucial distinction. These are the first pigeons in history with reproductive systems that contain the Cas9 gene, an essential component of the gene editing tool. The squabs of this flock will be born with the Cas9 in every one of their cells, allowing scientists to edit their offspring with DNA from the extinct passenger pigeon. Those birds, if everything goes to plan, will be the first live animals edited with traits from a species that no longer exists. The flock was created by Ben Novak, an American scientist who has spent the past 6 years working obsessively on a process known as de-extinction. His goal, to bring back a bird that disappeared from the face of the earth in 1914. Over the past 6 years, new gene editing technology has given us previously unimaginable control over genetics. The Crispr-Cas9 system consists of two main parts: an RNA guide, which scientists program to target specific locations on a genome, and the Cas9 protein, which acts as molecular scissors. The cuts trigger repairs, allowing scientists to edit DNA in the process. Think of CRISPR as a cut and paste tool that can add or delete genetic information. CRISPR can also edit the DNA of sperm, eggs, and embryos, implementing changes that would be passed down to future generations. Proponents say it offers unprecedented power to direct the evolution of species. I just want to throw in there real quick, whoever thinks that we're playing God, scientists or anyone who uses their brain to do anything other than finding their way to the local McDonald's or Starbucks, you're not playing God, okay? You if man was formed in the image of God, then of course you probably are just using all of your abilities, okay, since you were formed in the image of God. I'll let that speak for itself, but don't be retarded. Just because you're using your brain to do some miraculous things, it doesn't mean you're playing anything at all. It's called using your brain. Moving right along. Over the past 6 years, new gene editing technology has given us previously unimaginable control over genetics. Let's see. In January 2013, scientists published papers demonstrating that for the first time they had successfully edited human and animal cells using CRISPR. The news sparked fears of so-called designer babies edited for traits like intelligence and athleticism, something scientists say is still far off because of the complexity of those traits. But editing of embryos for research is already underway. In the past 19 months, researchers in the United States and China successfully edited disease-causing mutations in viable human embryos not intended for implant or birth. So again, it looks like the scientists are indeed getting a chance to learn about what causes what causes disease, rather, and what genes can be edited, for instance, to help counter you and I getting diseases. It could be cancer. It could be muscular dystrophy. It could be something that you'd rather not have in your child. So if you learn what causes it, and you learn how to edit that out of the genes, then that's a good thing. It's not a negative thing. So the more you learn, hopefully the more improvements you can make. Moving right along, the technology is widely used in animals. CRISPR has produced disease-resistant chickens and hornless dairy cattle. Scientists around the world routinely edit the genes in mice for research, adding mutations for human diseases such as autism and Alzheimer's in its search of possible cures. CRISPR-edited pigs contain kidneys that scientists hope to test as transplants in humans. Again, if you can create a disease or a mutation for a disease in mice, and then so that you could experiment and find out what counters that disease, then that's a good thing. You get a chance to learn a lot more without experimenting directly on humans. So again, you have to experiment, unfortunately, in order to find out. CRISPR has been discussed as a de-extinction tool since its earliest days. In March 2013, the conservation group Revive and Restore co-organized the first TED Extinction Conference in Washington, D.C. Revive and Restore was co-founded by Stuart Brand, the creator of the counterculture Whole Earth catalog and a vocal advocate for passenger pigeon revival. At the conference, George Church, a CRISPR pioneer and geneticist at Harvard Medical School, laid out a scientific roadmap for reviving a species. Church focused not on the passenger pigeon, but on his own pet project, the woolly mammoth. Scientists, Church explained, had partially sequenced the mammoth's genome using DNA extracted from ancient bones and other remains. Armed with that information, they could use CRISPR to edit DNA from the Asian elephant, the mammoth's closest living relative. Through genetic cutting and pasting physical and behavior traits of the mammoth, its namesake code and ability to withstand sub-zero temperatures could be added to living elephant cells. The idea that woolly mammoths might once again roam the earth made headlines around the world, but in his talk titled Hybridizing with Extinct Species, Church said that the intended result of his distinction experiment was not a genetic facsimile of the mammoth. With enough mammoth DNA, Church explained, as CRISPR-edited Asian elephant would become something else entirely, a modern hybrid that looked and behaved like a mammoth but shared DNA with a living species. So again, when you learn how to edit these genes and make progress on living species, just maybe you can have an animal that is more capable of surviving in this environment that we're in now. So you take some of the favorable characteristics or traits of something that's extinct, and even if you can't bring back an exact replica of the extinct species, maybe you can make the existing species more resilient to disease, more capable of withstanding cold temperatures in the event of extreme cold situations, or hot, whereby you have climate change taking its toll out on certain animal populations. That way the existing animal populations will be more resistant to warmer or hotter temperatures. What else? The passenger pigeon has a cult-like following, a global network of pigeoneers that includes scientists, conservationists, ornithologists, pigeon breeders, poultry geneticists, and avid birders eager to see the species revived. Even amongst these obsessives, Novak's passion stands out. Of the 1,500 stuffed passenger pigeons in museums and private collections, he personally viewed 497 out of the 1,500. He understands that his obsession is difficult for most people to understand. He has had a hard time explaining it himself. Novak grew up in a town of 200 people in North Dakota. Long before he could read, he was fascinated by the idea of extinction, digging unsuccessfully for fossils in his backyard. I was an odd child, he said. In 8th grade, Novak was working on a science fair project of the dodo bird when he discovered that the species was essentially a giant extinct pigeon. Nothing prepared him for the rush he felt at age 14. He came across photos of a passenger pigeon while flipping through a National Audubon Society book. I thought it was a gorgeous bird, Novak said. Male passenger pigeons were particularly colorful, with red breasts, feet and legs, and iridescent pink patches that glistened on the sides of their throats. The birds traveled in flocks that could number 3 billion, and were known for their grace and speed, flying at up to 60 miles per hour. Novak read histories that described passenger pigeon flocks so large they darkened the skies for days as they passed overhead. These massive flocks played an important ecological role, breaking branches to allow sunlight to rejuvenate forests and enriching the soil with their excrement. The birds were prized for their meat. Hunters could see the flocks approaching from miles away. The population went into steep decline in the late 1800s and never recovered. The last known passenger pigeon, a bird named Martha, died in captivity at a Cincinnati zoo in 1914. Her demise sparked the passing of modern conservation laws to protect other endangered species in the United States. Shortly after her death, Martha was frozen and shipped to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. to be stuffed. She's no longer on display, but Novak has, of course, seen her. Martha is in bad shape, he says. Written history and degraded taxidermy intensified Novak's desire to revive the species. No one can tell me what a passenger pigeon was like in real life, he says. I feel robbed of history. The first step was to sequence the passenger pigeon genome. The project was led by Beth Shapiro, a professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the author of the book How to Clone a Mammoth. Shapiro's lab studies the DNA of extinct animals, extracting fragments from bones and other remains, some dating back hundreds of thousands of years. Novak joined the lab in 2013 to work on the passenger pigeon project. Revive and Restore funded his work. Sequencing an extinct species genome is not an easy task. When an organism dies, the DNA in its cells begin to degrade, leaving scientists with what Shapiro described as a soup of trillions of tiny fragments that require reassembly. For the passenger pigeon project, Shapiro and her team took tissue samples from the toe pads of stuffed birds in museum collections. DNA in the dead tissue left them with tantalizing clues but an incomplete picture. To fill in the gaps, they sequenced the genome of the band-tailed pigeon, the passenger pigeon's closest living relative. By comparing the genomes of the two birds, researchers began to understand which traits distinguish the passenger pigeon. In a paper published last year in Science, they reported finding 32 genes that made the species unique. Some of these allowed the birds to withstand stress and disease, essential traits for a species that lived in large flocks. They found no genes that have led to extinction. Passenger pigeons went extinct because people hunted them to death. Shapiro says. In 2014, Shapiro taught a graduate class on de-extinction and asked each student to make a case for bringing one animal back from the dead. Extinct flightless birds, the moa of New Zealand and the dodo, were favorites, along with the Yangtze River dolphin. Some students cited an animal's ecological importance or value to tourism. Others mentioned the role humans played in the extinction of a species, a cornerstone of Stuart Brand's argument for reviving the passenger pigeon. According to Shapiro, none of these arguments justifies de-extinction. What's the point of bringing something back if we don't know why it went extinct, she says, or if we know why it went extinct but haven't fixed the problem? I think that's a stupid counter-argument, mainly because a lot of times before you bring something back from extinction, you won't know a whole lot about what's going to happen after the fact. In other words, as you destroy the Amazon rainforest and all of the crucial plants and vegetation and organisms that could help cure cancer and everything else, of course you're not going to know why you're bringing them back until you bring them back, because you maliciously and obsessively destroyed the forest first. So, yeah, when you don't think about what you're doing, when you're destroying the planet, you're not going to have any idea why you're bringing back any animals or plant life or any other organisms, for that matter, until after the fact. But based upon the biologists and different people who comb through the Amazon rainforest ecosystem, they're learning more and more that, a lot of these things could very well be the cures for a lot of things that ail us as a population of humans and animals. Moving right along, the dodo, she says, exemplifies the latter issue. The flightless bird, native to the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius, nested on the ground and had laid only one egg at a time. Settlers who arrived in 1638 brought cats, rats, and pigs that devoured dodo eggs. There is no point in bringing the dodo back, Shapiro says. Their eggs will be eaten the same way that made them go extinct the first time. Again, that's a very stupid argument, because hopefully we don't have the problem with nasty and filthy and uncivilized settlers settling into various countries or areas of countries, bringing rats and pigs and cats or whatever they brought with them. I think that what we learned about agriculture being brought from one country to the other, and what we learned about cleanliness and health will help prevent some of the disease-plagued populations migrating from one place to the other. So you learn from your mistakes, right? And then hopefully you can be clean and not worry about that problem again. Revived passenger pigeons could also face re-extinction. The species thrived in the years before European settlement of North America, when vast forests supported billions of birds. Those forests have since been replaced by cities and farmland. The habitat that the passenger pigeons need to survive is also extinct, Shapiro said. Again, another stupid counter-argument, mainly because we don't need the same type of vast and large forests, because you're probably not going to have the same number of passenger pigeons, since you're controlling more or less how many you can bring back from extinction and on what scale you're breeding and rebreeding the populations. So and nature has a way of making sure how it regulates how fast species grow and populate. So a lot of these things are indeed self-correcting. But we have to realize when man intervenes and destroys populations of animals and such, that's artificial, and we don't need to pretend like that's nature. That's not natural or nature. So if you bring them back, you learn about the genes and the ability to withstand disease and help us also live more healthy and longer, and that's the most important thing. Her interest in the bird was rooted in conservation rather than de-extinction. Understanding the exact cause of species extinction can help scientists protect living animals and ecosystems. Shapiro argues that passenger pigeon genes related to immunity could help today's endangered birds survive. I wanted to study the passenger pigeon, Shapiro says. Ben wanted to bring the passenger pigeon back to life. But what does it mean to bring an extinct species back? Andre E.R. Suarez, a scientist who helped sequence the passenger pigeon genome, says most people accept a look-alike as proof of de-extinction. If it looks like a passenger pigeon and flies like a passenger pigeon, if it has the same shape and color, they will consider it a passenger pigeon, Suarez says. Shapiro says that's not enough. Eventually, she says gene editing tools may be able to create a genetic copy of an extinct species, but that doesn't mean you're going to end up with an animal that behaves like a passenger pigeon or woolly mammoth. We can understand the nature of an extinct species through its genome, but nurture is another matter. With no living woolly mammoths or passenger pigeons to model social behavior, who will teach these species, these genetic replicas, how to behave like their kind? Again, a stupid counter-argument, mainly because the first priority is to bring the animals and the plants back from extinction. You study them, and then, just like what you learned what in the article is going to mention, in vitro fertilization. That was a major controversial issue, and after millions of babies were conceived using that method, now all of a sudden that's not a major issue anymore, right? So moving right along. We're going to need a new biology and names for all of this, Suarez says. Church concedes that there are obstacles to de-extinction, not the least of which is public apprehension. But the history of science, he says, is filled with ideas that start out sounding far-fetched, raise complex ethical issues, and over time move towards social acceptance. The more unknowns there are, the more intense the disagreement, he says. He points to in vitro fertilization, now a routine reproductive technology that has led to the birth of millions of children. When IVF was first proposed, people worried about the ethics, the repercussions, and possible risks. As soon as Louise Brown was born, and let me get away from the wind here. As soon as Louise Brown was born in 1978 and completely normal, the disagreement disappeared, Church says. In almost every country, the process of de-extinction requires approval from governments, academic committees, and the public along the way. To inject the Cas9 gene into his birds, Novak needed permission from the Office of the Gene Technology Regulator in Australia, as well as ethics and animal welfare committees. He'll need another round of approvals to breed and edit the next generation of his pigeons. In the meantime, Novak is steadily building the flock. In May, he injected 19 eggs with the Cas9 gene, but only 2 pigeons survived hatching. In August, 11 squabs survived from 46 eggs. Novak and a small team of scientists plan to repeat the process until they have 22 pairs of birds for breeding. They're considering which passenger pigeons traits to add first, combing through the sequencing data for genes associated with the extinct birds' distinctive coloring and preference for life in large flocks. After he determines how passenger pigeon DNA manifests in the rock pigeons, Novak hopes to edit the band-tailed pigeon, the passenger pigeon's closest living relative, with as many of the extinct birds' defining traits as possible. Eventually, he says, he'll have a hybrid creature that looks and acts like a passenger pigeon, albeit with no parental training, but still contains band-tailed pigeon DNA. These new old birds will need a new name, which their human creator has already chosen. Patagonia's Neotapestius, or New Wandering Pigeon of America. So again, that's that for that particular article. And just make sure you guys understand that we have large brains on our heads. We supposedly are capable of doing a little bit more than posting pictures on Facebook of what we eat or going to eat or something. We need to have debates. We need to have discussions about the future of humankind. Where we're going to go with gene editing. Who's going to be responsible for deciding who gets access to the technology, how it's going to be priced, how we're going to pay for it, and what are the repercussions, short, long-term, and medium-term, for gene editing and such. So, in other words, there's always going to be complex issues that man has to deal with and understand. And the more you use your brains, the more you try to look at the big picture and the complex issues, the better off you're going to be, okay, as a civilization. You want to hopefully be known for tackling hard to solve problems and discussions that are more complicated than what we're going to eat for dinner or something. So, as I like to say at the conclusion of every podcast, you guys have a great day and keep your eyes and ears open and stay safe out there. And we'll talk later. Bye.